Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of the Phlightless Phoenix Podcast. Oh, I think at this point I'm like almost a month behind on uploads, uh, which is only four, which ain't that bad, but I keep meaning to do it, and then something else comes up, and I get distracted right when I'm about to do it. So I need to just sit down and get them going one of these evenings. Oh, maybe I'll do that tonight while I'm watching the football game. Oh, it felt like a bit of a long weekend in some ways, but actually not that long of a weekend in others. Like, it kind of feels like I just finished recording the last part of the last episode. And now I'm suddenly back here recording again, but at the same time, I distinctly remember yesterday it felt like it was a very nice long weekend, which is kind of a weird thing about time is as you move through it, your perception of it changes drastically just from moment to moment, but even moments you remember as taking forever can feel like they went by quickly. Which I think that just has to do with the way that the human brain perceives time in a nonlinear fashion, which is really an interesting part of biology that I think a lot of people don't know about. But yeah, your brain actually does not perceive time as time happens. Your brain kind of mixes and matches a little bit based on what you're trying to do and your experiences in the moment. Uh, One thing that happens with specifically is uh, when you move your eyes, like when you are focusing on an object and then focus on another object on the other side of the room, uh, your eyes, like your brain doesn't look through your eyes while you're moving them between the objects. It goes from one object and then sees the next one and then retroactively enters the information that it expects to see in some ways. Like, that's a very oversimplified version of it that, like, I've seen some things on, so I believe it enough because I've seen some like actual like scientific paper references for it. So I've seen enough to believe it's true, but I don't know the exact mechanism behind it. But it's really interesting because yeah, like your brain does not perceive time in a linear fashion. And so just thinking about things or looking back into the past, you are going to view things differently currently than you did at the time, both in terms of how they were and just how it happened in general, especially with regard to the time it took to happen and how long that felt. But like yesterday, it was a really good day, but it felt like a pretty long day, and I still like remember feeling all day long like, oh, this has been a nice long day, because usually the weekend feels like it flies by so quick you can hardly catch it. But this past weekend felt nice and long. But then now that I'm sitting in the car, I feel like I was just here driving home from work on Friday. So there are some separate parts to it too, and I think it probably also has to do with like just I know I tend to dissociate's not the right word. Segment like work and home life a bit more. Just I don't I don't like ignore one during the other completely, but once I get home, I just prefer not to think about work and like to just let myself focus on work at work and focus on home at home. But I think that ends up being kind of interesting because it when I'm at work, it kind of feels more like I was just at work the previous day when I get there and kind of get in the mindset for it. I bring up all the right information and it feels more recent. Whereas when I get home, it feels like I can hardly remember what I was working on sometimes. But then I can always remember where I left off at home the previous day or that morning or whatever. So it's a very interesting thing to happen, but I think it's pretty cool the way it works. Oh, but anyway, yeah. Oh, I don't even remember what I was talking about and how I got on this conversation. Well, I guess monologue, not conversation, considering I'm the only person talking here. It is interesting because I listen to a whole lot of podcasts just because I work 8 hours a day, and most of that time I'm able to just listen to music or podcast or whatever, so that it helps me focus during work. But I've kind of gone through a whole lot of podcasts, and most of them have two or more people involved in order to keep a conversation flowing. And depending on what it is, it may be required. Like most of what I listen to is Dungeons and Dragons and other role playing game podcasts, which require many people because it's a group game that's being played and it's just being recorded as a podcast. Whereas, then there's other podcasts. The majority of podcasts are small groups of like 2 to 5 people who are having a conversation about certain topics, usually about 3 people. But they're having a conversation about different topics and kind of just creating a bit of a recording of that and kind of bouncing off each other with jokes and ideas and conversation topics, and that kind of keeps the flow going a little better than just 2 people, uh, especially. And then there's one person podcasts, which tend to be more informational podcasts. They aren't usually as focused on, like I'm doing here, just events and random conversation and interaction. The one person podcasts are most commonly based on like factual retellings or uh, stories and things like that. My favorite podcast is Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, and I like listening to that one. And that's one he does all on his own, but that's a history podcast, as the name would suggest, which is a lot of facts and stories and things like that that are told in a not exactly a lecture tone, more of a semi-conversational, semi kind of informational tone, where it's definitely told in the form of a story, but with certain facts and figures and references to literary works thrown in there, as well as references to archaeological evidence, and conjected with his personal kind of assumptions, views, and beliefs. And so that's a very structured and kind of well formatted podcast. And then you have some a lot of like murder mystery podcast. I've listened to a couple. I don't listen to very many of those. I know my sister listens to a lot of like uh murder story podcasts for some reason, and those tend to be just one person, but they're kind of recounting the events in order how they happened, and doing the same, kind of having certain facts inserted in there with a little bit of conjecture here or there, more of a storytelling format. But those are all very mostly scripted, at least, where it's very clear that there's at a minimum a fact sheet with a basic outline that's kind of going on. But then my podcast, on the other hand, is very loose, I will say. And I mean, if you're listening right now, you probably, if this is your first episode, hey, thanks for listening. And if it ain't, thanks for listening. But this is much more of a off the wall kind of just expressing my inner thoughts and daily interactions. And I think that's a fun thing to do just on my own, but I'm not surprised that there's not much of a following developing for this podcast or anything, because it's not something that is entirely useful or entertaining to listen to. More of just a time filler, really, and a fun little project for me. But that's all it really needs to be. Anyway, that's all the time we have for this segment. I will continue this tomorrow. Oh, hello, and welcome to part 2 of this week's podcast episode. I finally got around to getting all the episodes for the past month. I was right, it's been 4 of them, a whole month. Oh, I was finally able to get them all rendered, and I had one uploaded, and then I had to leave because I rendered them overnight, and then started uploading this morning, but you can only do one at a time. So I started it and then left for work, and then didn't have time at lunch. But probably this evening I'll upload at least one more, if not the other 3. But those should all be up either today or tomorrow, so by the end of this week we'll be all caught up, and then maybe I can upload this here episode on Saturday, if I remember correctly, and then I'll be completely caught up on finally doing it. I need to take a look. I didn't realize that it's been an entire month since I really even looked at the YouTube channel for this, which I've been thinking about putting the podcast on some other form of streaming media, but it's just kind of difficult to due to some because the only other ones I'm really familiar with would be like Spotify, which requires a weird kind of third party system that I'm just not interested in going through the process for. And then the other option is some other kind of, I think it's like, the only other one I can really think of is like Apple Podcasts, but I am not a fan of Apple, as I have said. I think I've mentioned repeatedly, but if I've not mentioned it, definitely is a thing. I'm not a big fan of Apple in general. I think they're generally making their products worse on purpose so that you can't diverge from their very distinct product line if you get into it at all. But these days, everyone's kind of doing that to some extent. Even Microsoft is getting bad to where they're almost requiring an account. Well, they are requiring an account for a basic Windows login, but luckily I know how to go around that so that it is not an issue. But, anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, this weekend I finally got around to building that. I've talked about it on here before. I was building a planter out of some old fence boards. It's nothing too complicated, just some old boards and some nails, but it's a nice little 2 foot by 2 foot by 1 foot planter that should be good for a little flower bed. The thing is, the fence boards are not flush all the way across. So, like, they're, in order to get them 2 foot long, I would need like 4 and 3/4 boards to get 2 foot across. I just got 4 boards. And so I'm just leaving the gaps, and then we're gonna just either let the dirt fill it in the gaps or let the get some kind of like, probably just some light plastic in the crevices there to keep it contained more or less. But it's ended up looking pretty nice. I'm not completely done with it. I ran out of nails, so that's something I had to go get more of, and so now I'm just waiting on a good time to finish it up. I'll probably do it this weekend. But I think I'm starting to feel a little better in terms of stress. Just my wife kind of helped me work through some of it and just talked to me about some of it, because I didn't realize I was quite so stressed. But then she kind of helped me work through it, and I realized I've been kind of just pushing off all my hobbies. That's why I hadn't done any uploads for a month, as I was just completely overstressed by work. And I really couldn't talk about much else on the podcast, and I was barely keeping up with the podcast as it was. I'm still only doing one part per day for now, just because I do think it kind of is a little easier to keep up with in terms of amount of time it takes, but also it's just a little more interesting going day by day, because I feel like when I had 4 times a day, I didn't have as much to say on each one and ended up either rambling or repeating myself kind of over and over again. Although with a day in between, I tend to forget what I spoke about or talk about daily events, which do seem to be rather repetitive on most days, and give more daily updates. But that's kind of going back to treating this more as a audio journal or something similar to that rather than entertainment for others, because I do want to keep putting this out there so that if anybody out there is listening and wants to continue listening, I'll have this out there, and do enjoy sharing my thoughts on certain subjects. But overall, I understand that this is going to have a limited reach and mostly for myself. But it is somewhat interesting how kind of I know that a lot of people focus on what they'll leave behind when they're gone, because death is an unfriendly inevitability in most people's lives. And to some, it's not so dire, and they're not as worried about it as others. But it's something that I've struggled with on and off, just because it is there in your mind. And I've had times where I'm a little more scared of it than I really think I should be, especially as a Christian. I do believe in life after death. And so sometimes I get a little more worried about it. And I feel it even more just because I know that I profess to believe in heaven and the resurrection, and I do believe in that. But when those doubts and fears arise, it just takes a lot of self-discipline to remind yourself that having doubts is not the same as abandoning your faith. I've just struggled in the past with feeling like I am being faithless by having doubts. But as I've gotten older, that's something I've come to realize is not a sin to doubt. It's part of being a human, is working through those and doubting. But being a Christian is when you have those doubts, not pushing them aside, but looking into them and trusting God and reading the Bible to reassure your faith. And so that's made it easier. But because there is this barrier beyond death, it's an unknown that you can only have faith about what happens next, regardless of what you believe from any faith or lack thereof, or faith in something that's not an afterlife either. Just, you can never be sure. And so it's a thing that a lot of people have a lot of fears and thoughts about. And I think that I really don't remember what my point was. I think that I don't remember where I was going with this. Oh, that happens sometimes. I just start talking and kind of get down a completely different tangent subject that makes me forget what I was talking about in the first place. But anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Sorry to leave you on such a weird note for this segment, but for y'all, I'll be back in just like 20 seconds. Oh, hello and welcome back to this is probably going to end up being part 3. It's Thursday, which is usually part 4, but yesterday something weird happened and the recording just did not work at all. I'm really hoping that this one works. Oh, but hoy, it was a day. I definitely felt like it was getting better, and I was being less stressed this week, and it was all gonna be okay. And then just today hit, and now I am 100% certain I am gonna look for another job and hope that I find one soon. I haven't said anything like that to anybody at work because if I don't find another job, I don't want them to think I'm quitting at any moment. But I am very ready to say that I'm moving on and to find somewhere new. Because it is just getting more and more stressful, and I brought that up to my supervisor today, and her response was pretty much, yeah, that's gonna happen, and it's just gonna get worse, so deal with it. I don't think she was trying to be that dismissive of it, but I really don't think she's dealing with the increased stress in a healthy way, because she's just as wound up as I am, but she's just not really dealing with it and is kind of expecting me to just ignore it, it feels like, and I can't do that. I just have been asked to do 10 times the work in half the time with absolutely no change in anything else, and I'm just tired of it. And every time somebody's asking now, I've just been saying I am too overworked for this, but they keep on just ignoring that. So I would not doubt that they'll still act surprised when I give in my 2 weeks notice. And I really didn't want to quit, because right now we're preparing for another kid and there's just a need for some stability, but this job is just getting worse and worse about not working with me at all. And they're just kind of expecting more and more for me to just ignore everything else and just do nothing but work. And I'm not okay with that. And I've told them, and they've ignored it. So it's just time to look for something else. Oh, I'm hoping I can find something good, but it's just really discouraging when you finally make a point to try and work with them to figure out some way to make it better, and they just make it abundantly clear that they aren't going to try. Because I really feel like if they just hired a couple more people and listened to me and cut back my workload, I could do plenty, and I could still do more work than I've been doing, but I just can't do the amount that they put on me right now. And I just really don't like. I definitely have some social anxiety, and usually it isn't bad and doesn't affect me, but just when it comes to things like this, it does. And so I just really am not looking forward to eventually having to just put in my 2 weeks notice and having all the questions of, oh, when this happened, why this, why that, and just having to tell them that I've told you all this. And it took a lot for me to just say that I was feeling overworked, and now they're just ignoring me. So it really just is extremely discouraging when you have a hard time with it and you really push yourself to make an effort and tell them you're feeling overworked, or let them know that it's difficult for you right now, and they just come back with whatever. And I don't really know how to let them know that that's not okay without quitting. Like, I want to just tell them that I am not okay with how it's been going, but I feel like if I do that, I'm just going to get fired. And I'm either going to get fired, or they're just going to tell me that that's not okay to deal with it, and I'm going to quit. And they're going to know it ahead of time. And it's not easy because, if they know that I'm going to quit, I know I'm not going to get paid anymore. And like, I'll get paid for the days I work, but they're going to be trying to phase me out. And that gives me a really hard timeline for finding a new job, especially considering that I'm working to make enough so I can pay for a big hospital bill soon. And it's just not really manageable. I know I'm going to have to bring it up, but I'm just really dreading worst case scenarios, I guess. Worrying that whatever I do, there's going to be a time frame where I am not able to get that enough money to pay off our hospital bills or afford insurance. And just like, if we have a hard time with any of that, it's really going to come back on us. And I just don't know what the best way to go about it is. I guess just what I was planning on doing. I'm going to update my resume and start applying for any job that looks good. try and do a good job of figuring out which one's which. But I really thought this job was going to be good, but I knew that I was on a time crunch last time I was looking for a job, so I didn't really get multiple options open. Just kind of went with the first one available, and it went good for a couple of years, but they just haven't been keeping up with how we're doing. Oh, and I know they're already hurting for accounting personnel, so I really am not wanting to leave them in the lurch on needing to hire somebody and get them trained fast. But it's definitely difficult. But also just because I know that I've been doing several parts of the job for 2.5 years now, and I've gotten it down good, and nobody else even looks at a lot of aspects of it anymore. And so if I'm gone, I don't know what they're gonna do, but I need to remind myself that that's not my problem, and they'll be okay. But they really just need to hire more people and do better about responding to employee needs if they want to keep people around good. I guess part of the hard part is I'd really like to use them as references because I've enjoyed working there up until now, and I think I worked good for them, and I think they'd give me a good reference, but I don't really want to tell them, hey, could you give me a reference while I look for a job since I'm not happy here? Because I feel like then they won't give me a good reference, and it's just going to be very difficult. But, overall, I'm sure it'll all be okay. It's just, difficult in the moment. But I guess I'll continue doing this podcast in the meantime and keep it updated. Because I feel like there's something these days that a lot of the people have been talking about. It's the fact that currently job searching is just an absolute nightmare. And that's another reason I've been dreading doing it is you send out about 100 applications for every one person that even emails back to tell you you're not accepted. People just are not responsive, and they've set up automated mailboxes to deal with job applicants, and that ends up creating a kind of a issue where they're not really paying attention to a lot of what's going on. And so I'll just have to see. Last time I think I sent out about 50 applications, and I did better than a lot of people are experiencing. I got about 10 emails back, so 1/5 of them emailed back, and out of those, 3 of them wanted to go to a next step. 2 of them were online interviews that they ended up canceling because somebody else got the position. 1 was an in-person interview that is the job I have now. But maybe this time it'll be a little better. That's what I'm hoping for, at least. So that's all for today, and we'll continue this tomorrow. Oh, well, hello. And welcome back. Hi, it has been a very long day for me, and it's just been a bit stressful and very I'm very tired. But there's not really anything specific I'm wanting to moan and groan about. Just definitely glad today's a Friday. Oh, but it's just kind of getting to the point where I don't even want to bother talking about it that much. But I'd really like to just start talking about more fun and positive things back like when I started this podcast, and it wasn't just me moaning and groaning about different things, but I think it's just one of those things. I know I say that a lot, but these days it's really true that it's getting harder and harder to keep positive. But oh, well, I gave myself till I turned onto this road. So that is the moaning and groaning for today. But there is a blue ambulance right there, which that's interesting because you don't often see. I don't know about everybody else, of course, but I don't often see blue ambulances or just blue emergency vehicles in general. Like, they're all red with some like yellow details or stripes or something. And then police cars are black, black and white around here. But I've started seeing more colors represented on emergency vehicles, mainly just like blue and yellow more than the usual red, which I think the red is the standard because it like pops out more from the rest of the cars, and so it's a little more noticeable. But I don't know if that's something that they just used to do and it was a tradition that stuck, or if that's still a thing where they try and make them specifically brighter colors in order to have them pop out more and be more easily visible. But I mean, that's what the big flashing lights on top and the loud honking horn are for. So I'm not entirely sure that that's really necessary to have that bright color scheme. I know fire trucks are always red, and I doubt that'll ever change really, just because, I mean, it's such a commonly ingrained thing now that whatever the original intent of that color, uh, now it just is fire truck color. Which it's one of those things where it probably was originally for the fire trucks to stand out back when they were just fire wagons or something like that. But it's gotten to the point now over so many years that it's hard to imagine fire trucks being a different color. Which it's weird when you think about all the things that happen like that. Specifically with colors, one I know is Santa Claus. Used to be blue, and then Coca-Cola ran so many ads with a red Santa that people just kind of turned Santa red. And that's a very, weird thing to have happened. That guy a guy on a motorcycle just swerved right by me on a ramp in a one-lane off-ramp, flew over the median on a motorcycle, and just almost hit me, and then almost hit the car in front of me. And now he's going at least 90 miles an hour because I can't even see him anymore, and I'm on a highway. That's ridiculous. Anyway, back to what I was talking about in the first place was, the Santa used to be blue and then turned red after such a successful ad campaign from Coca-Cola. But there are a lot of things like that we don't even think about, that we just kind of associate certain colors with certain things, but it's more that there was one original kind of version of that got updated rather than there actually being some association. I think there's a similar linguistic thing. I don't remember it well enough to quote it exactly, but I know that there's a lot of people that have theories that certain sounds are just inherently positive or negative because so many words across different languages have similar words for positive and negative things. And the word no is very common across a lot of languages, but there's also this thing where languages evolve from earlier forms of language. And so, there's a debate amongst linguists whether the similar wording for negative and positive words comes from a natural association or from a similar root. And really, it's interesting either way, but that's something I've just seen before that kind of reminded me of the whole color fire trucks are red, because the first ones were red and now all of them are. But one day somebody might associate them together in such a way that, even now I probably don't know the original reason. I think that it's so that the emergency vehicles would stand out, but it might just be because fire is red. And that could be the simplest explanation for it. But there's not really any easy way to tell. The fire truck thing, I could probably look it up, but there's so many things we kind of just do and say and act out every single day that come from some deeper origin that we don't really know. And it could be just some ridiculous joke that somebody made once. And somehow it caught on to the point where now we use it in everyday language without even realizing. But it's just interesting to see how things like that can evolve over time, especially over such a long period of time, because spoken language, especially, has been around for longer, like more than twice as long as written history for sure. But I'm trying to remember. I don't think that I've ever heard when scientists think language originally started, but I know that it was certainly a long time ago, and language has been getting more complex, of course, but the whole idea that cavemen were using and like not the idea that cavemen were stupid is ridiculous, because cavemen already used complex language with unique words and already were pretty much just modern humans. Like Neanderthals, of course, were a slightly separate thing, but like modern humans were are cave people. Like that's not new. Like language didn't come around so recently that cave people didn't have it, and the people drawing cave paintings were just as smart as we are today. It's just they didn't have 20,000 years of technology behind them to give them everything we have, so the smartest thing they could do was make a new tool, and that is probably just took just as much brain power as discovering some of the laws of physics. It's interesting to think about our scientists these days who are discovering laws of physics and finding new information out about stars in the universe. 20,000 years ago, they would have been just as smart, but it would have taken them just as much research and effort to figure out the best way to mount a spearhead. Anyway, that's all the time we have for this week. So thank y'all for listening, and catch y'all next time.